Well, welcome to another episode of Naked with Dr. Money. I'm Dr. Stephanie Ardrey, known as Dr. Money. And Naked with Dr. Money is my weekly vlog where I share a little bit of the details of one, how I'm managing my mindset as I build a startup organization and raise capital for this global organization, real time. And as I navigate the same waters that you are, along your journey and doing so in such a way that I claim the love, joy, and happiness, about the process, even the parts of the process which may not be my favorite parts of the process, but they're part of the process nonetheless. So I find joy in the process, as well as recognizing that along our journey in terms of delivering wellness outcomes for each of you, it's important that we take a holistic approach. And that is, we work on helping you address your mind. This is identifying where you may have suffered or experienced emotional trauma. And guess what? We all have. And so being able to have your awareness be exposed to thought leaders who are able to address, some of those traumatic experiences and create a space for your healing, be it incorporating things like meditation, silence. I did a silent weekend and it was so, so healing just to spend that time in silence is something that actually, if you've not done, I recommend that you find a weekend where you are silent. And it's so powerful. You think, how can I do this? Trust me, you can do it. And you build upon that, but more importantly, mind, then body. We work to detox your body. Your gut health is really important. So if we detox your body from toxins, as well as the toxins that are typically stimulated by mental, right, then we also are able to assist you with releasing your soul assignments. And that's also having a safe space where you can connect with others. But anyway, my weekly vlog is where I have an opportunity to have a guest and we have a conversation about mindset. We talk about how mindset can either be, for them, they'll let me know if mindset, in their opinion, is the product of their nature, how they were nurtured, or a little bit of both. Then we talk about how mindset contributed to the motivations, and then more importantly, how those motivations contributed to manifestations. So I'm excited today because today I'm having a conversation with a gentleman that I haven't had a chance to catch up with for a bit. Quinten Washington. We met a few moons back, and I'm so glad we did. We occupy, similar the space of real estate development. He's the president and CEO of Quintessential Construction Managers and Consultants. I having a background in real estate development, appreciate the need for and being able to work with smart teams of organizations. And you often need construction project managers, be they for your own project, or if it is that you're working on a project that's a publicly funded project, you must have a third party to evaluate to make sure that there's a safe liaison between both sides of the plan to make sure that scope, schedule, and budget are in alignment. To me, I pride myself as a development expert. I always tell folks, although I've been on the development side and we were a builder developer, I don't pretend to be a construction manager. I'm a development, executive. And so I work well, though. I know how to play in the sandbox with the other professionals. So Quinten impressed me early on when we met, and definitely I'm grateful that we've remained in contact. So without any further ado, I'm going to bring on Quinten. Hey there, sir. How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful, wonderful today. All the way out here in Washington, D.C.
Yes, out in you said in the DMV area, so nice,
Yeah.
Washington, D.C. But you originally, you're from Houston.
Well, I was born in Houston,
Okay.
okay, but by way of Chicago, on the south side. Uh,
Okay.
we migrated to Los Angeles, California, where
Got it.
um, I guess got friends from first grade all the way through college that, you know, during the time that I spent there. I've actually lived here in what I call the DMV for longer than I had lived in Los Angeles, actually, at this point in time in my life.
You know, that's
That's
a funny thing. My son says that to me because I say, you know, I'm from the Bay Area, but I moved to Southern California for, you know, a significant birthday. And my son is like, you're not from the Bay Area anymore. You've been in LA, you know. I'm like, no, you're always from your home. Look, you know, my stomping grounds, home is home.
yeah, yeah, that's usually where I start out when people ask me, you know, because they'll look at me and like, where are you from? And then I may say Los Angeles, and they said, no, you're from somewhere else.
Exactly.
I say Houston, and they say,
Yeah.
that's what I
That's what I thought. There's something else. No, because truthfully, so I last year was the first time I had an opportunity to visit Houston. I had been planning to go over the last few years because a friend of mine's, her uncle is the mayor. So when he first was elected in, I was like, oh wow, that's perfect. That's a great opportunity. Houston must be growing. And I'd heard a lot, but you know, I hadn't had a chance to visit. And I said, be careful what you say, because lo and behold, I was flying back and forth to Jamaica. And I
thought.
literally ended up having to stop on a layover, and the layover somehow or another they missed. So I had to spend a night in Houston.
Uh,
And I was like, I know I
okay.
said I wanted to visit Houston, but I don't mean on overnight at a hotel just to catch a flight. Like, I want to visit the town and meet the people, you know, and see
Yes.
what it's all about. But there's definitely something about, as they say, Southern charm, and more
Oh,
importantly,
yes.
I would say even your disposition. You don't come across, I would immediately go with everyone else, you're not from LA.
Okay.
Although you spent some time there, and you know,
Yes.
even when I was reviewing your bio, you know, you were definitely on the forefront, you know, part of the engineering program at Northridge, and so you definitely were an innovator as a young person. But let me, before we go too far there, let me ask you this. Let's set it up, our conversation. So
Okay.
I want you to think about when you first realized that you had a particular mindset, and I want you to think about if you believe that mindset was the result of how you had been nurtured, or if it was your pure nature, or if it was a little bit of both.
I guess I look back on when I felt I developed a particular mindset. I would say it was maybe during the early part of high school, 10th grade, actually, because I had experienced a lot of things up to that point. We didn't live in the best neighborhoods, you know. There was a lot of violence, crime, things of that sort, and I had to figure out, like my father always said, I had to figure out how to navigate between both worlds.
Mm.
When I was very young, I didn't understand that part, but as I got older, I figured out what he was talking about, because I lived in a neighborhood that had violence, but I was around people at school that weren't, because most of the classes I were in were honors classes. So those weren't individuals that, you know, would beat you up or anything like that, you know, or you had to be concerned about. So that gave me an opportunity to, you know, develop a mindset for myself from the standpoint that I figured I had a brain.
Mm.
God had given me the same brain that, you know, he had given others. I just knew how to utilize mine in a different manner than most. And as far as I was concerned, anything that I put my mind to, I could accomplish, no matter what people thought. Because I set my own limitations, others don't. And I've always looked at it that way.
So then that sounds that that was kind of like a little bit of some nature emerging
Oh,
that
yeah.
you had. What, how was your family dynamics? Are you an only child, or do you have other siblings?
No, I have, I had two brothers and a sister. My middle brother, he passed away quite a few years ago. But I'm the oldest of all the siblings, so I had the opportunity to, I guess, be in charge most of the time, even though they didn't like it a lot. And but that that pretty much worked in my favor, I think, for later in life, because I really didn't have any role models to follow, I guess. I was always the person out in front trying out something, and I come back and share it with them. It's like, hey, you can do this or you can do that, you know.
So what was your family's, thoughts about, some of your basically being a bit of a maverick, if you will, going out into uncharted territories? Was it like, look at our and being the firstborn, right? Was there certain
Mhm.
pressure on you're the leader, so we're expecting you, to develop your leadership skills, or was it just kind of by default because the family is moving so fast and everybody has to fall in position, and if and if leadership is something that you naturally seem to grasp, then step in and make it happen.
Yeah.
Which do you say would be more of how you found yourself in your leadership role?
It was more or less by default because, I sort of led by example. I have cousins that basically ended up following me on into college, and they will always, look at me as if, that's the first one that went and graduated. So we're trying to, emulate what he's done. We're trying to accomplish what he's accomplished. And I still deal with that to this day when I see them. Even their children look at me and they say, so you're the one that was the first one to do this.
And it only takes one, right? And that's, I
Yes.
think, the thing that sometimes people forget is it depends. So, as much as I, can relate to being the maverick, I was an only child for, many years. And then my mother, decided to help her brother, in raising his child.
Mm-hmm.
So that, was a different set of experiences, but pretty much my ideals had been formed, because I had been able to experience, who I was, and also just the relationship that my mother and I created. Her being a young single mom, that's a different journey. She was 18 when
It
she had
is.
me. So she's still learning how to become an adult herself. And so those early years, I experienced, that journey, in terms of what it
Mm-hmm.
looked like. And the different, but the thing being is that because I was a female, even though on one hand I was encouraged to be entrepreneurial and create my own path, there also
Uh-huh.
were boundaries that I wasn't supposed to go beyond. And see, I went beyond. And so
Uh-huh.
instead of being applauded for that, I was often criticized for that because it didn't look like, well, you're supposed to be, as my grandmother said, I've been in all the honors classes and all those things because I was, planning to go to Berkeley and all of these things. And then my mother was like,
Mhm.
great, no, I need you to get a job so you can help pay the
Mhm.
mortgage. Like, dang, you could have told me that like back in fourth grade, fifth grade, I would have taken all these gate classes. Like I could have had a whole different school journey had you said that
Yeah.
sooner, right? But since you made me do all the hard classes, and then
Yeah.
now I said, at least let me negotiate something. And so that's how I ended up negotiating. Well, at least let me get a 2-year degree.
Mhm.
I'll finish the rest of my education on my own dime, right? So a lot of
Yeah.
people have said, oh, you got 2 doctorates, you just must be. It's like, no, this was a commitment at
Yeah.
15 that I made to me. It ain't got nothing to do
Yes.
with you. It ain't got nothing to do with impressing. This is
Exactly.
Stephanie's commitment to Stephanie. But that mindset, right? Because I've been knocked down several times. And what I
Mhm.
realized along the journey, thankfully very early, was that to be an entrepreneur, I had to invest in not only my technical expertise, but I had to invest
Mhm.
in something else that would motivate me to want to execute on these uncertainties, kind of even against the odds, and I know some of it was even harder because I was in places that it was okay if it was a guy, but guys were
yeah,
just entering some of these boardrooms. So how dare you try to leapfrog some of the guys and be in the room? We're not ready for a woman yet in the room.
yeah.
In construction and real estate development, I say I learned how to curse properly because it's not a place for you can't have thin skin.
No, you
Um,
can't.
because you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars on the line. I control $1 billion, multi-billion-dollar portfolios, and you want to see how really and who's emotional. Start messing with some hundreds of millions of dollars of projects that
Yeah,
you'll see some emotions fly real fast. And politically correct is not even in the room anywhere. Forget out the window. It never it was never part of the process. I know this, through your own
oh
experience.
yes, most definitely. In construction, happens all the time.
Oh my
There's a
goodness.
different way you handle yourself out in the field than you handle yourself in the office, and sometimes the two get crossed.
Yes. Yes.
And they'll kind of look at you like, you're in the office now, not out there.
Oh
I said,
man. Oh
but
man.
you did something that took me to there, and I'm trying to make sure you understand what we're trying to do here.
Oh, absolutely. I remember being in the boardroom where, well, one time I wasn't in the room and I don't know what they were slamming, but it sounded like somebody was being slammed up against the wall. I was like, oh my God, oh my God, what's happening in that room? Right.
Yeah.
And then, definitely being in another room where I called in, my engineering team and I
Hmm.
asked them to solve a particular problem. And, again, in this organization, I was the first woman of color, the highest
Yeah.
rank. They
Not
were
trying to
always
listen to you.
to test me, right? So
Yeah.
I remember this one standoff where, the architect, they're so arrogant, they're big, whatever. And so he had not solved the problem. And so my rule is, look, I'm not paying you to drive to my office to talk to me about something that I told you to come to my office with a solution. So I said, pull out the tracing paper. We're gonna fix it right now. They were like, I'm like, yeah, since you didn't do it at your office before you got here, if I'm paying you to be here, you're getting ready to fix it right now. They were like, okay. So they started calling me after that. They were like, Miss Memo, better read her memo because she's not playing about what we better have when we show up at. And then guess what? Because guess what? Also, I was making sure that they received their checks on time.
There we
So
go.
there you
Mhm.
go. Guess what? So I do expect you to deliver the product. Like, are you guys gonna punk me like this? Like, I'm just, you know, oh yeah, we're gonna go on another expensive drive and get lunch and get another Porsche. I'm like, oh no, 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 you're not on my watch. Not on my
Yeah.
watch. But always being tested. And so it's amazing because for me, real estate development was a career change. And when I think about it though, the only reason that I could make the change and survive was that they may have thought it was a job for me, whereas for me, it
Mhm.
wasn't that. It was a means to an end. And
Yeah.
so I promised myself that I was going to have my own global development company. But at this point, I was going to learn development. So it was like, I was determined. Just about there was not. Of course, I stepped in there, prayed up every day, like Lord, please,
Yeah.
please don't let it get too crazy today. But you know what I'm saying? But it was like, it was that they couldn't figure out because trust me, they tried everything they could, but my technical skills were so solid that it was
Yeah.
really me perfecting my mindset. I realized that that's what it was. It was a test of mindset. Would I
Hmm.
buckle under pressure or would I find something deep inside of me that nobody could bank on and
Yeah.
allow myself to get through? And that's how I succeeded. They were like, at the time when I left the company that I started my career, I'd spent 5 years there. And they're like, most dudes that they recruit from USC don't even last 6 months. So they're
Yeah.
like 5 years. They count those in dog years. That's 35
Yeah.
years. Like they're like, oh my gosh, you're golden to have
Yeah.
survived that long in that, or like they had that reputation. And I was like, yeah, it was my mindset. I was determined that I was going to
Hmm.
learn everything that I could so that I could be right where I am right now.
Yes.
But the
And you're
emotional,
absolutely right, because I sort of did the same thing, because I actually started my career when the PCs were first coming out, and we had like one on each floor at the office building that I was at, and you had to sign up to be able to use it. Now, granted, those didn't do a whole lot back during that time, but I made it a point to sign up and take out time to get on it, and that led to other opportunities. The other thing that I looked at was that I found out that managing personalities was also very important, because what I noticed, I would observe individuals that were assigned to different projects, and they were always clashing with whoever the client was.
Mhm.
And then they would ask them to be removed. Okay. I kind of figured out how to navigate things just based on my upbringing, because you have to handle yourself when you're in some of those situations and figure out how to diffuse different things.
Sure.
And that has worked to my advantage all along. I mean, sometimes I would even raise my hand when they talk about a project that was in trouble. And they're looking at me like, dude, did you not hear what they said? It's a problem over there. I said, yeah, but I think I can go there and fix it. And usually I would. It
And
was it.
that's amazing. That's amazing, because then that's
Yeah,
a confidence in your attitude. When we talk about it, I
yeah,
remember I was
exactly.
interviewing, I was telling someone about at one point in my career, I interviewed for an opportunity with John Lang Holmes, and
Mm-hmm.
their urban division was based out of the South Bay. And at that point, I lived in Orange County. And so they had a philosophy as an organization that they didn't want
Mm-hmm.
their executives dealing with that type of commute. So they would
Yeah,
not hire me in a permanent position that would require that type of commute. So instead, they ended up giving me a contract. But I remember
okay.
when I was interviewing and we were talking about what's a project executive. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
a project executive that is successful with bringing a project within the scope, schedule, and budget. Those are technical skills that we all
Yeah,
kind of get to at a certain
yeah.
point.
Mm-hmm.
The decision that you're making is, am I a good fit, both culturally within the organization and culturally with the contracts, the clients that you're doing business with? That
Yeah,
is at this point where the decision lays, and so they're
yeah.
like, wow, they were like, wow, we see, kind of why I'd had the track record that I had, but still, Black women at that point were not in the role.
That
We're
is correct. Yeah.
almost 30
Mm-hmm.
years ago. So I
Mm-hmm.
was, on the forefront of, my son is 27. So 24 years ago is when I
Yeah.
started my career. And I remember going down to building and safety in Los Angeles. And I think I had about $5 million of not to exceed checks, paying for permits with my engineers and stuff. And I remember initially approaching the counters and literally having staff completely ignore me
Oh, yes.
until they realized that I was the one writing the check.
Mm-hmm.
And then that started to shift the dynamics, and because of my approach of saying, well, I was going to learn about each of the disciplines. So if I started off with my civil, by the time we went through 2 rounds of uh, plan check and corrections, heck, I could just about make the edits myself. The same thing with like all of my trades. I went through
Yeah.
all of their process because I was writing the checks. So
Yes.
you're not going to pretend to tell me that the corrections were X. No, I was right there at the counter.
Yes.
And then I changed it to be Y because that was a better way of saving us time and money. So that's how
Mm-hmm.
we're going to do it. And by the way, on your follow-up notes, you missed these 3 things. So they were like, oh my gosh, they started calling me Miss Memo, but I'm like, that's okay. Because guess what? Not
Yes, ma'am.
like, don't mess with me, guys. I'm not the one, but also taking technology because, they weren't, I was a closet techie. So all of the technology I was, I came in, I had studied construction project management before I went to USC for real estate development and then started my career. So I had, we had studied softwares for managing your project, but then I get into this big firm and they're not using any of this technology.
No,
And it's like, wait a minute,
probably.
you guys are making it way harder than it needs to be. There are tools.
Exactly. Yeah.
We can do this a little bit differently and we could have a little bit better approach. But it came down to, that mindset and that willingness to continue to evolve. I mean, what do you think? I know, we had talked about before we went live, being not only a father, but a grandfather and being able
Yeah.
to contribute to the next generation of young folks. So if you're talking to your grands at this point, what do you tell them about mindset and how mindset contributes to their motivations and what it is they'll manifest along their journey? Or have you had those conversations yet?
Well, actually, it's funny that you asked that because I actually have. I tell them the same thing that I told my children when they were growing up. Don't let anybody else set your limitation. You do that yourself. You can figure out what you can't do on your own. Nobody else needs to tell you that. And I told them the other thing I always look at, nothing that you attempt to do is impossible. Impossible things are things that people look at that haven't been done yet. You're going to prove them wrong and you're going to make it happen. I told them you got to go through the world with positive thought, because positive thought brings about a positive outcome. And I share that with them and my grandchildren. You got to be strong here. Okay. That's where it's got to start.
That's so amazing because I really feel like that's the conversation that has to happen and earlier and earlier.
Oh, yes.
I'm amazed. I was so amazed when I ran into people, early in my career who they were saying needed to learn how to be accountable. And I'm like, what do you mean? You in a career and you didn't learn how to be accountable? Like, I had to learn how to be accountable at like 5 years old, 3 years, like,
Yeah.
what are you talking about? You 30 something and you don't know how to be accountable, or
that's the problem.
you're 60 and don't know how to be accountable. You're like, what? Huh? You still haven't learned? Amazing. But people have, avoided. And so you can only bring that back to mindset. So somebody thought that there was a way to avoid the growth and development that happens when you hold yourself accountable. Because if you're constantly blaming everyone else, then unfortunately you're never gaining the learning, right? You're bypassing the learning. And so what that means is you don't develop beyond that point. And so you could hide for so long, but eventually you step into a room with people who see right through you. It's like,
yes, you do.
You're like a red flag. We see you.
Yeah.
Right. So again, that's why I would say that even at this day and age that, imagine having to create a business model that offers people a place to heal from emotional trauma, but to develop their mindsets, because that still is essential. But that's the difference between good and great, right? If we look at Kobe, LeBron, we look at Tiger, we look at Serena, we look at Venus, they had all talent and skills. And you would say others, but what is the thing that distinguishes them from their peers and then allows them to become great? There's a point that it's beyond just your technical talent.
Yes.
That's where the mindset becomes so critical.
Yes.
So the sooner you develop it, which is so funny because you know how you think along your journey, certain things stand out. And one of those for me was Maslow's hierarchy. And I always found it interesting how I could kind of equate my life along that hierarchy where I felt I was, right? And I said, dang, it seems like every time I get past basic needs met and I'm moving up, then something slaps me back down to having to, go to that point. But then I think really it was in 2020 where I felt I was far enough along the journey that I could look back and see where I was. And I realized that, oh my goodness, all of these things have been lessons for me to end up exactly where it is that I was. So then I said, I was so glad that I had invested the amount of time in mindset, but it hit me that really the so-called Maslow's hierarchy should be flipped. We should begin with mindset, because if you master mindset, everything else will take care of itself. But it's the fact that you don't master mindset and you save that to last is why the journey is such a struggle along the way. I mean, is that kind of well, what's your experience, along that? Would you say that it was the mindset?
It was a mindset, most definitely. Because I can remember in college, in school of engineering, we got there and they basically looked at it because we were people of color. We weren't as smart as some of the others. And there were times where you would get challenged in your class, from the standpoint of a professor trying to prove out that point. But the thing is, if you were weak-minded, you would let that affect you to the point where maybe you wouldn't attempt to do some of the things you had done. But I never looked at it that way. I always figured I was going to try to figure out a way to flip it and show them that, hey, you're wrong. That may be the case for others, but it's not the case for me. And doing that, I gained the respect of a lot of the professors that I had. Even more, even to the point where one of them said something that today would be, considered. He said to me, "You must have some white in you."
Wow.
And I was like, "What do you say?"
Wow.
And then so the way I flipped it, I says, "Well, yeah, I guess during slavery, the slave masters, they had their way with our women. So
Yeah.
that's very well possible." That just messed him up. He didn't know how to deal with that. He was done with me after that
Exactly.
point. But I was like, I can't believe he said something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, because I'm showing some intelligence. Oh, that's because I have white in me. Really? I
Right. That
can't
shows this
be
level
that
of
way
ignorance.
because I am,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But those are always, people, again, it's junk in, junk
Yes.
out. So if you've been
There
fed
you go.
junk that
Yes.
someone has told you is history and
Yes.
it's their story, forget facts, right?
That's
Facts.
correct. Yeah.
As I have a cousin, he says, don't try to confuse me with the facts. My mind is already made up. It's like,
Okay.
gotcha.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
That's all I would
Yeah.
be doing is facts. Facts are
Yeah.
not, do not make up any of your statements. Got it. So I'm not
Yeah.
going to waste my time having a debate with a fool, right? It's like,
Yeah.
but letting the fool know you're on notice. I see
Yeah.
you.
I see you.
I see.
Yeah.
You better know you're seen in this particular situation. No, that was, I think, the gift that my mother gave me as a young kid. She told me that, look, you evaluate yourself and
Mm-hmm.
you evaluate the people that are supposed to be teaching you because they work for you. And if they're
Yes,
not
they
doing
do.
a good job, you need to put them on notice that they need to perform better. That's what they're getting paid to do. Don't treat it like you're there and they're all empowered. That allowed me to be in a situation where, being mistreated. I wrote in college and had a teacher fired. And
Mm-hmm.
the administration, they were like, well, who wrote the letter? I was like, I wrote the letter. But they were like, wow. And it was like,
Yeah.
guys, uh, yeah, I was on my way to UC Berkeley pre-med. Like, what the heck are you talking? Like,
Yeah.
come on now. Yeah, I could write a letter, but my mother taught me the power of the pen. So
Yeah.
absolutely, they're like, yeah, she's out. We can't even. There was like, we cannot even pretend to respond to this without litigation. Later in my journey,
Yeah.
a professor,
Mm-hmm.
definitely, and it's kind of like, it's sad because it's the ones who, we hear these sayings, better to be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. But of course, that's the one that's throwing the darts. And you're like, huh? You
Yeah.
can't even properly articulate. You look like you just walked in from one of your hippie slumbers. And you're talking to me about what?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
really? Like, do you hear yourself? Like, before social media, because these are the things that would have gone viral if we had
Oh,
a
yeah.
chance. I'm saying, if
Mm-hmm.
only I had social media, back then, that would have
Yeah.
aided in shutting some folks down, their stupidity. But anyway, but yeah,
Yeah.
no. So Quinten, it's amazing how fast a 20-minute conversation goes. And believe it or not, our conversation has gone. But it's been so delightful to speak with you. What do you see? What's on the horizon? What do you see, next with your business?
Well, the thing that I'm involved with right now, I've become an EV charging station reseller. That's another aspect of our company, because connected with an organization that's dealing with zero emissions and cleaning the environment and all those things that are very important. But my focus also is on some of these communities that are overlooked, that have these diesel powered and gas powered trash trucks coming through. You got kids with asthma and things, other sicknesses, because of the the emissions in the area that aren't affecting kids in other more affluent areas, because they're the ones getting electronic trucks and things coming through, and we still have the the gas powered stuff smoking up all the streets. So I'm looking at it from the standpoint that I want to get involved with that aspect of trying to clean up those areas and bring some knowledge and understanding to individuals in those areas that they consider disadvantaged, to understand the importance of trying to change things, and also working with local governments to try to do that as well. So
That's excellent. I think that definitely providing those opportunities, and I would expect in rural communities as well. I've been putting together
yes,
an initiative to reach out to farmers, in
yeah,
particular, and expand our ecosystem, so we're in
yeah,
wellness resorts and organic farms. So organic
yes.
farming. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's
Excellent.
funny that you should mention that, because just before our call today, I actually had a meeting with some individuals, and we were talking about that same exact thing in the rural communities. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good. Well, I hope that we'll catch up again and I'll
sure.
be able to have you back for a check-in, but more importantly, offline. It looks like I need to have a sidebar conversation and see where some
Yes,
of our business deals intersect. I was asking you offline about if you were doing any construction project management around the world. I may want to discuss a few possibilities on some of my projects, because
sure.
I'm always, again, looking at expertise, but I'm recognizing, even as I go out into some of these markets, that there's just some gaps. There's gaps in sometimes experience and knowledge, and
Oh, yes, most definitely.
where I come from, being on the better finance side of the house in terms of development, I certainly have development expectations in terms of how we go about executing our business plans. And in my first phase, I'm dealing with more acquisition and repositioned assets, but I will be doing ground up. I
Okay.
want a little bit more of a lead time, for the ground up projects, just because of, I know all of the details and how meticulous I have to
Yeah,
be with putting all of those pieces in place, and the type of bench that I need to have available to execute.
yeah.
It's
Looking forward to the opportunity.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you again. If anybody wanted to reach out to you, how should they do so?
Um, Guess they could reach out to me via email. That would be best. I can't remember if I'd given that to you or not, but
No, I don't have it, but I can post it to the site. Following our
okay.
conversation, I'll look through and I'll post it to the site. Absolutely. And
All
then
right.
I know that you have a LinkedIn profile as well. So a lot of times
That
for
is correct. Yeah,
those,
that may be even the better way to do it. And then, follow me, connect with me, and that way you get my different updates that I put out from time to time. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you again for your time today. I'm wishing you and your family, all the best, and
Okay.
continue
Thank
to
you.
have a great day. And I'll circle back so we can catch up on some opportunities.
That sounds wonderful.
All right.
Okay.
Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, everyone, this was another episode of Naked with Dr. Money. As I shared, I'm Dr. Stephanie Ardrey, aka Dr. Money. Guess what? If it's noon Pacific time, time for another episode of Naked with Dr. Money. I hope you'll take care of yourself until our next time together. And remember, mindset, it's everything. It informs not only how you experience your daily journey, but it also informs what your wellness journey is going to be about as well. So check us out at 420wellnessjamaica.com. See if we can get a wellness week planned for you at one of our locations, as well as make sure you feed yourself something good, mind, body, and soul. And I'll see you next week. Remember, Wednesday, noon Pacific, Naked with Dr. Money. Be well.